Hi, I'm JC Alvarez and welcome to Talking About. And we're very happy to have Levi Kreis with us today. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you.
Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
You know, we are celebrating the release of your new album, Where I Belong.
Very excited about the new release.
It's really fantastic.
Thank you.
It's really fantastic. And as a follower of your work, this album is distinctly different from your previous works. It's almost as if you've come into stages in development as an artist.
I mean, that's true. It was a real interesting process coming from the last album, especially, to this new album. I felt sort of like I'd made the jump from songwriter to artist in a way. You know, the Gospel According to Levi was very contextually driven, and it was very important for me to create that album lyrics first and then come back and say to myself as a songwriter, how do I want these messages to go down easily? And it ended up being a lot more guitar pop and not really necessarily with any thought of what was a genuine representation of what my musical history is. And I think it took me going on the road for over 300 cities singing those other two albums before I realized that there were certain songs that something happened to me when I was performing them. I felt like it was just larger than life. Something resonated to me, and it felt like church all of a sudden. And I could feel that there's a synergy happening with certain songs in my repertoire that wasn't carrying in a lot of the others. And that was a real good clue for me and helped me kind of realize that perhaps I needed to go back to my influences from a child, from gospel music to the Jerry Lee stuff to the stuff that taught me how to play and how to sing, and I made a point to make that a part of what this new album sounds like.
It's interesting that you do reference your role in Million Dollar Queatet, playing Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah.
That was instrumental to the process of making this album, because this album feels more to me like a performance. It feels like you're really sort of like performing, right, as if you're almost portraying a character at parts of the album itself. Especially with the fact that Just Gonna Be Alright is such a really good feel song.
Knowing that it works out, it just takes a little time, and I know everything's gonna be alright, everything's gonna be alright, it's alright, everything's gonna be alright, everything's gonna be alright, and it's alright, everything's gonna be alright, it's alright. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. Don't you worry about a thing. 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 Everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. It's alright. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. It's alright. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. It's alright. You know everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright, pretty baby. It's alright.
That was the first single. Was that a conscious choice to make that one the first single?
Yeah, and really it's because I think it was just the strongest song, you know.
But the acting, or the performing, did the acting sort of like lend itself to the development of this album? Did you kind of like see those two worlds blending?
Yeah, it did, because we were doing Million Dollar Queatet in Seattle, and which was kind of the first time that show had gotten on its legs, and it was really exciting. And at the same time, I was writing a lot of the stuff for this new album, and I think that's what prompted me to actually revisit the influences that initially shaped my musical inclinations, and it no doubt fed into what the sound of this album is, you know. So I have Million Dollar Queatet to thank for that, to a degree, you know.
Because it's kind of funny because so many pop stars want to be actors. And it's sort of like you're you know, and I know how offensive that could, you know, that could come off as quite offensive to some people, but you're a songwriter that acts, that sort of like took the experience of acting and blended it into your music. And this is like the example of when that stuff works. This is what I think happens.
Nice.
Like, you know,
nice.
that's why that's how this album reads to me.
Well, and it's funny because I never had the acting bug growing up, and I never moved to LA to want to, you know, and it was something that inadvertently happened. And I'll tell you the story about how it all started with the role of Roger in Rent.
Mm-hmm.
I was a week into Los Angeles. I was laying on this girlfriend's futon, and I saw this paper called Backstage
Not laying
West.
on a girlfriend.
No, not laying on the girlfriend. There's no songs about her.
We'll come back to that. We'll circle back.
And I saw this magazine, Backstage West, just a piece of paper, and I was, you know, never heard of it, was curious about it, thought, well, what better way to spend our first day in LA than to go to one of these little event audition things. I'd never heard of Rent, but I knew that it was a cattle call, and I knew what that was. So I decided I was just gonna head out into the city, and I was like 160 something in line, and the line wrapped around 2 blocks, and 6 callbacks later, I got a call for the role of Roger in Rent, and then I was ushered into this whole experience that I had never considered before, and I fell in love. I fell in love with acting.
Well, it's kind of like, that's almost like a no-brainer, because it's like you're so well suited for that role, but the role of Jerry Lee Lewis is, I mean, from seeing
even more
you,
suited.
it's even more suited.
Yeah.
And being a singer-songwriter, immersing yourself into that role must have been so amazing.
Well, it's real interesting because it was a nice balance between your homework as an actor, because frankly, there wasn't a lot of footage prior to Jerry Lee Lewis at 20 years old, which is where I'm portraying him. So he is just starting out. He had his first single had been released, and he was still working as a session player for a Carl Perkins session. And so I was able to actually bring a lot of my own life experiences to it, because at that point in time, Jerry Lee Lewis wasn't Jerry Lee Lewis.
He wasn't the phenomenon.
He was the kid that wanted to prove himself, that wanted to get out there and do what he loved and make it happen and impress the world. And I can absolutely relate to that.
So there were easy parallels to both of your existences.
Yeah, well, besides the fact that, you know, when I was like knee-high to a grasshopper, my mom was playing old 45s of Jerry Lee Lewis, you know.
So you were hearing the music as a kid, and now all of a sudden you're doing it.
I had even learned his music as a kid. I mean, I was playing Great Balls of Fire by the time I was 12 years old, so it was kind of that family party trick, and it's always been a part of my background and my history, especially even right down to Jerry Lee Lewis's cousin, Jimmy Swaggart, you know, with my history of running around and preaching and singing. You know, I used to learn my Jimmy Swaggart songs and have my altar calls and, you know, lay hands on the people and you know, so there's so much about what that story entails that was a part of my own story.
That's amazing, the similarities. Now let's talk a little bit about that sort of your religious upbringing, because it's really strict. It's like anyone who who studies about you and knows about your background. Tell me about your childhood and growing up, and then, you know, because you were really immersed in the church.
I was a very sincere boy. You know, we were fundamental Baptists, so we thought the Southern Baptists were liberal. You know, I mean, there was no dancing, like it was Footloose all over again. And it was, and I took it very seriously. I mean, while I was completely aware by the time I was 8 years old that I had feelings for the same sex, I was also very aware at 8 years old that was an abomination to God. And
because it's what you were being taught.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard it quite frequently at the pulpit, so that internal struggle started very early. And while all of a sudden I am traveling to a different church every weekend all over the southern region through Tennessee and Kentucky and Georgia and Alabama and all these places, preaching and singing, I was very convinced that there was as we would say in the church, that calling on my life. And so I felt that I owed God to get rid of this thorn in my side, as Paul would call it in the New Testament, referring to my homosexuality. And it plagued me for years, so much so that I checked myself into, the Exodus International Healing of the Homosexual program when I was first year of junior high, behind my parents' back. Nobody knew I did it. I felt that was absolutely a conviction that I needed to follow through on, and did that for 6 long years until I began to think for myself and redefine what God was for me. And it's been a process now since my last year. My first year of college was my last year of Exodus, and began to find my own route to embracing a loving God who embraces all of us.
Absolutely, which is I think sometimes a lot of gay youth have that issue as far as like reconciling their religious faith with accepting what God needs to them, and also solidifying their identity. Therein lies a struggle, and fortunately, you kind of like really weathered the whole storm. You kind of also did it on your own, which I also think is a great story. That you did it on your own. You sort of like took it upon yourself to sort of like weather that storm and come out on the other end.
Well, and I think the temptation is for us to just ditch what's hurt us. And a lot of our community, we don't have anything left by the time we get to the point where we embrace who we are. And there's a lot, it's very hard for us to want to go back into that experience and put, and begin the journey again and redefining what God is for us. And I think that's one thing I try to put out there, encourage anytime I'm ever on the road with kids who have gone through the same thing. And JC, it's amazing how relevant it still is.
Oh, yes.
Because you would think that even in 2008, things would be different.
Yeah, and fortunately though, your music is so...
2009, sorry.
2009, yeah, it's like that Black Eyed Peas song, It's like... 2008, so it's 2008. But in your music is so powerful in that it's always had a message. This album particularly is extremely joyful. There's a lot of strong soul qualities in it, but to me it feels a little more R&B, and just really just like more band, just more almost like it feels like a live album.
I like that you mentioned performance earlier, because I think one of my own personal challenges as an artist has always been how can I capture the energy of live performance onto a CD, and that's always been a very difficult thing for me to do. And so I think what helped me get to that point more so on this album was to start with just the piano and the bass and the drums, and allow that to build, and then very meticulously add things that define it but don't get in the way. And I don't need anything else, but just what defines it that much further. And it was a real learning process for me as an artist,
So even the production approach was different from your previous works.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because this doesn't feel heavily produced. Not that your other stuff does have that sort of like, but it's just very organic. This is like really, and it's also really happy. It's just a really positive, really pro album. I've said it before, I've told you that there's songs that I like on this the most that speak to me. Stained Glass Window is amazing. And it has
Thank you.
Yeah, it's such a great song. And this is the first time that you actually put it on an album, but you've been performing it for a while, haven't you?
I've been performing it for a while because you're familiar with Del Shores and his award-winning play Southern Baptist Sissies. Another story of moving, that first month of moving to LA was actually discovering his play. And I walked in there inadvertently, didn't really know what it was about, and by halftime, I was in a fetal position, just like crying, because I was so shocked to find that there were other people that had gone through what I had just spent my whole childhood going through. I had no idea that this was a shared struggle. And I just didn't know what to think. And Del was actually behind me, and that's how we met, and he invited me to see the play as many times as I needed for free to get through this, to get over the bad. I think I saw it almost 36 times until finally I was house sitting for him. At this point, we're really good friends, and I was like, well, Dale, did I ever play you this song I wrote based on your play? And he was like, well, no, go ahead and play it for me. So I sat down, and he was just like, you have to perform that after every performance of this play. Even to the point where we had Delta Burke and we went on the road with that play. It was like they were sure to have me right along with it. So it's been a song that we've hoped to save for the movie Southern Baptist Sissies and the soundtrack, but me and Dale had a conversation and we just thought it was really time to let that out, and we felt that it coincided with the feeling of this album.
Yeah, especially its placement in the album, because to me it's almost representative of Act 2 of the album, because the first half of the album feels like Levi the character, like Levi like the showman. Okay. The second act to me is very spiritual. It's more, it's more internal.
And I wanted to kind of gradually get to that point. I mean, I think for me the first half of the album, I hope, translates into the kind of freedom and acceptance that I've experienced in the last 2 years. I can look back at the Gospel According to Levi and feel like, while that was really confrontational in nature, and it got a lot off of my chest, and it talked about that whole religion versus sexuality, and put something I think that was really relevant for a lot of kids to hear, as I've seen when I went on the road with it. But at the same time, I had not discovered a very important word called forgiveness. And it took me the process last summer for me to look back and say, well, this shaped who I am, but I have to really honor everyone's journey, even if they hurt me. I have to understand that we are all meant to learn certain truths in this world, and that all of us do what we know based on our limited knowledge and experience. And if I actually embrace that, then I have to embrace that no one's done anything to me. I let that go, and I bless whatever their spirit's journey is. And that's a huge freedom. And that freedom really translated, I think, on a lot of the feeling of this album, because it was so relieving, especially coming from that last album.
You have that luxury as an artist that you can sort of like exercise your demons creatively.
And I do. Often.
Do you? Do tell.
Yeah.
That's why each album just feels dramatically different. Are you in a really, really happy place right now?
I am. Yeah. I just feel settled into my own skin. It's like, for the first time, all that is that history, that whole ex-gay Levi Kreis stuff that's been like out for, since I've come out as an artist, is really sort of part of the past, and I feel like that's fine. It shaped who I am, but I'm just so happy to be where I am and who I am, and see myself not so much as the ex-gay, but as a human being who is finally really comfortable with where he is.
That must feel really good.
It feels relieving.
Yeah, that must feel really good, and it must already be stewing some new stuff for you.
It is.
For another project. The Dream Project, what would that be like?
You know what?
Levi Kreis Dream Project.
The Dream Project, you know what? I have to be honest with you, and this was such a journey for me to get to this point where I feel like musically and lyrically, and even as a person, there was something that just kind of settled in.
And you feel that, you get that.
I feel like I feel blessed, because I feel that's sort of been my dream project thus far. This is my favorite experience as someone who's recorded music since I was 14 years old. This has been the most rewarding, personal, artistic experience.
Do you feel that with every album? Does that happen with every? Okay.
Absolutely not.
You felt it differently with this one?
That's the first album I've ever felt that.
Excellent. That's fantastic. That's really fantastic. And I'm sure that, like I've mentioned before, I'm sure that your acting informed that in how you approached this songwriting experience. So it's kind of like you've almost like really acknowledged this whole new individual that you are through combining all these art practices. More acting for you in the future?
Yeah, we have a movie coming out next year, actually, called Vega, Texas, which I'm really excited about. I actually get to see the final product next week, and I'm just on the edge of my seat. I can't wait. I'm going to continue with Million Dollar Queatet through August 31st, and then there's, as I've said before with you, unofficial plans yet, but to go to London. We can't officially give a date and a time, but it's looking very good, and I think probably by next year I'll be on the West End doing Jerry Lee Lewis.
Now, that show must be amazingly draining on you, because it's like, as far as like, I mean, it's not even like the energy it takes to perform Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah.
I mean, that must be exhausting in itself. But to have to do it again and again and again, do you find an angle to play him differently every night? Is there something that happens, or because I can't imagine it just being automatic?
The coolest thing about the experience of doing Jerry Lee Lewis is that, the music is such a part of my history that literally to play that way and to engage musically with the band is so second nature to me, I don't even have to think about it. So it becomes an actor's workshop. I get to finally go into the experience every day as an actor and say, okay, I'm gonna find new ways. What's new about this today? For me, and that's really fun because I haven't had as much experience with the acting, certainly as much as I've had with the music. So it's like a playground. Every day that I get to go, it's like I want to wipe the slate clean. I know the foundation of how the character's built, and then to just be able to go spontaneously with whatever, the cast is always going to be in a different mood. He's going to be in a different mood. He's got a different take today. She's going to do something different, and
but
to be able to do
that.
I know, and I think that's what that's what makes me love stage. More than film, probably.
And what about when you get an opportunity to perform your songs in comparison to his? Do you sort of like, can you separate the two and just be like, find yourself in your performance?
I can't in spirit, but there has been a bleed over.
That's
there has absolutely been a bleed over.
Like,
because because I can tell that slowly my own live experiences have been getting a little rowdier.
Interesting.
In nature, because I'll find myself like turned this way and playing and singing, and it's just like I find myself doing things that I normally wouldn't have ever done.
Really?
And I mean, and it doesn't.
It's like you're channeling Jerry Lee.
I think it really just did. It freed me up to do what I would naturally probably do. I think that it's playing a role like Jerry Lee Lewis is always pushing you so far out to the extreme that when you bounce back, you're just free to do whatever you feel at the moment.
So you needed that push. You sort of like needed Jerry Lee.
I think it enhanced me, yeah. But it's always refreshing to go back to my own thing. I have wonderful producers who allow me to continue to do my own career and get out and do my own shows. Still, as I'm doing 8 shows a week with this Jerry Lee, with Million Dollar Queatet. But it's always refreshing to go back and with the intention and the sweat that I put into wanting to put a message into my music, it's very fulfilling for me to go back on the road and perform with the intention of uplifting and healing, and leaving people in a place that's really positive and freeing. As opposed, it took me a while to see the value of pure entertainment, because coming from the church, cutting my teeth on music that has to be, from that conviction.
Faith-driven. Okay.
Yeah, that has to be faith-driven and from that deep core place of conviction. It took me a long time to really just appreciate entertainment for entertainment's sake, and I think that's probably initially turned me off to the whole Jerry Lee Lewis thing. But now I get that, and I understand that does have a wonderful escape for 90 minutes. But it also helps me enjoy when I go back to my own thing, what I've created there,
So you'll never just, oops, I did it again. That music.
No. Will you please slap me if I ever do that? Will you please come and remind me?
I just think you want me to hit you.
Yeah, please hit me if that ever happens.
So let's. Your music is relevant in that regard. There is definitely messages in there. When you're writing them, when you're writing the music, is it that important to you to have that sort of message? Can't you just write from the sake of just writing the ditzy pop song? I have to ask
as
that
a songwriter,
okay,
and as a fan of pop music, there is always I'm always going to enjoy writing that kind of stuff. But when I have to sit and perform it night after night after night,
gotcha,
I know it's going to make me crazy, and that would make me crazy. I enjoy the process because I enjoy the like crafting a really great 3-minute and 30-second pop hook that people can't forget. I love the challenge of doing that, but it's not what naturally would flow out of me as someone who would want to have something to say to a group.
Exactly, because these songs on where
maybe I'm just rife with import and I need to loosen up.
No, because definitely the songs on Where I Belong are entertaining. And like I said, they do have a great performance aspect to them, and they do get you going, and they're great stories. And at the same time, I feel like even though this is a very different album project for you, you're not compromising who you are as an artist.
Right.
Which happens so often to so many artists, and I for one am very grateful that didn't happen.
I think that's the blessing of being independent. And I think that that's always going to be the reason why I love being the only one to have to answer to. Because I
Well, you're not the only one that.
Well,
There's never just you to answer.
let's pray and see if he approves.
I'm sure he does.
No.
I'm sure he does. I can't imagine him not. Levi, bless you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank
The
you.
album is brilliant. Where I Belong. Levi Kreis. I'm JC Alvarez. This has been Talking About.
Between what I think and what I feel. The only thing that my soul can do is to lift your little hands, long lift your hands, and I know it's you, and that's why I said I'm not afraid. Let it rain, let it pour. This is what I came here for. I'm not afraid. No, no, no. Let it rain, let it pour. This is what I came here for. Say, girl. What you say, what you say, what you say? I'm gonna lift them, I'm gonna lift them. Hey, but what if I don't think I can do it? What if I don't think I can make it through my day? Hey, wait a minute. What if somebody don't stop on me? What if somebody call my name? What if somebody does something wrong to me? What if I do? What if I do, man? That's why I said I'm not afraid. Let it rain, let it pour. This is what I came here for, yeah. I'm not afraid. Let it rain, let it pour. This is what I came here for. Let it rain, let it pour. This is what I came here for. I'm not afraid. How many of y'all are not afraid of this shit? Why is that? Some know how to lift your hands, don't you? That's why you ain't afraid of that. Let it rain, let it pour. This is what I came here. This is what I came here for.